Matthew Bartlett is a Republican strategist I quoted earlier who was in the audience for the Trump town hall. He previously served as a director of the public affairs at the State Department under President Trump. Jennifer Horn served as the chair of the New Hampshire Republican Party. She left the GOP in December 2020. Both join me now. Matthew, let me start with you as just someone who was in that room. I was so interested in hearing your account of that and just the sort of nuance to people's reaction. Just give a sense of how you were reading people throughout and what you were picking up that maybe the cameras weren't.
Sure. I think you had a typical New Hampshire town hall in so much as you had a wide group of Republicans, independents, some that were supporters of President Trump and there to see him, and some that came with a true deal of skepticism around him. As you mentioned, there was a notion to try to keep decorum in the room, to try to make sure that this did not go off the rails and that people were allowed to express themselves through applause. That clearly became a bit of an issue. Certainly when I turned on my cell phone afterwards, the text messages started coming in. My gosh, it looked like Trump had the entire room. And just being there, it certainly didn't feel that way when there was a scattering of applause or even a loud applause. I do not believe that it was the entire room. I certainly think it was a lot of the people that, like President Trump, like his style, like his personality. But there were others there that sat, again, bewildered or absolutely disgusted to hear him talk about January 6th, to hear him talk about the libel case. Some of this was very unfamiliar verbiage to the crowd, and I don't think they knew what to actually make of it.
I just want to make sure, and I really, really appreciate you coming on and sharing this, because I think it's actually a really important perspective. As someone who makes TV, I know that sometimes what the camera's capturing and what the room is like are a little distant. But I just want to make sure that you're not projecting how you were feeling when you said like people were disgusting. Like you're seeing that on people's faces, right? That you could feel that actually. That's not just how you felt.
Yeah, and just to be clear, I was an appointee at the State Department under President Trump, and proud of the work I did. I resigned on January 6th, right behind, the Capitol here, walking home, and I remember vividly seeing it filled with what I thought was an absolute disgrace. Now, I've heard other Republicans talk about, some conspiracy theories as to this was an organized effort or this was Antifa. I've never heard anyone refer to it as a beautiful day. And I was mere feet from the president, hearing him talk about that, a day where I, resigned. I thought it was an absolute disgrace. I thought it was disgusting. And, I'm just happy to say that the entire room did not feel that way.
Jennifer, I'm not the messenger here, but I am invested in this because I actually think it's very important for the country, particularly because he really does seem to be running on a campaign of like, I'm going to finish the job from January 6th. It seems to me the best argument here is more than move on. It's that he's a loser who lost and he's going to lose again. And the thing that ties together is confronting the reality of the fact that he lost to Joe Biden, a person that I think most Republican primary voters view as sort of incompetent and too old, and it's ridiculous that is the guy that he lost to. It does seem to me the message here to drive home more than anything is he's a loser who lost and will lose again.
Right, a three-time loser who lost and is guaranteed to lose again in the general election. I listened carefully to the numbers that you were quoting in the opening there, Chris, and what we're missing, what we're sort of, not remembering maybe. I was there in 2016. The President Trump only won about 33% maybe of the primary vote in New Hampshire, and that's all he needs to win continuously to get the nomination, as long as the field is as crowded as it's going to be now. So you want us to be able to convince primary voters, Republican primary voters, so that he doesn't end up being the nominee again. The problem is there are already too many people in the race, in the primary race, number one. And number two, that 33% are going to stay with him. And as this primary unfolds, it's going to, in my opinion, my very strong opinion, is that it's going to go in the other direction. He's going to pick up more votes, not lose them.
So what you're talking here, I just want to be clear, and I'm going to come back to you in a second, Matthew, just like the delegate math, which is different in the RNC than it is in the DNC. So it's a winner-take-all system. They haven't changed that, right? So if you win by a percentage point, you take all the delegates from that state. So you can run the board with, if there's enough candidates and you're running against them 31%, 32% state after state after state, you're not taking that proportional share of delegates. You're actually taking the whole state, which is the way you could springboard from 32% against a crowded field to the nomination. But the delegate math aside, my question to you is what is your characterization just of the group of the folks that that are Republican conservative voters in New Hampshire of the locked in, no way, hell or high water, they will vote for Trump and the that?
You're asking me.
I think that's on
Jennifer. Let me go to you and then you, Matthew.
Sure. So I mean, here's what I think about the Republican primary voters in New Hampshire. And again, I'm going to go back to one of the numbers that you used. The idea that there are almost 40% of Republican primary voters who say that they'd rather not see Donald Trump be the nominee. But the question that you're not asking them is, if he is, will you vote for him?
Sure.
Are you going to stand behind him? But the reason that matters so much is you just have to understand that's the mindset of the GOP primary voters down the aisle, across the spectrum.
Yes.
They are going to be all in for Trump if he ends up as the nominee.